Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. So now let's move our perspective from individual risks to the enterprise level. So that takes us to enterprise risk management. So enterprise risk management is a plan-based business strategy that aims to identify, assess, and prepare for any uncertainties that could negatively or positively influence the achievement of the corporation's objectives. Notice two important elements in the definition we just read. First, ERM addresses uncertainties that could influence objectives either negatively or positively. So it's not just about threats, it's about opportunities too. The second point is that this definition says that ERM is focused on the corporation's objectives, meaning it's strategically oriented, not just operationally focused. So here's the key differentiator. ERM seeks to understand risk as it relates to an organization holistically, not individually. This is totally different from traditional risk management approaches. So essentially, in traditional approaches, different departments manage different risks independently. The finance team worries about financial risk, for example. The IT team worries about cybersecurity. Operations worries about supply chain. Legal worries about compliance. So each department function has its own risk processes, its own risk language, and its own risk priorities. The problem with this approach is that risks don't respect organizational boundaries. For example, a cybersecurity breach, it's not just an IT problem. It has financial implications. It could have legal implications, reputational implications, or even operational implications. So managing a cybersecurity breach in isolation misses all these interconnections. So ERM breaks down these different silos by looking at risk across the entire enterprise, understanding how risk in one area might affect other areas, and then making decisions about risk management priorities and investment throughout the organization. So let's see why this holistic approach is important by examining the limitations of the fragmented risk management approach. So in the past, risk was managed in a fragmented way within functions and business units. So each area had its own approach, its own tools, and its own priorities. And risks were processed individually. So you have safety risk in one area, insurance is another, financial risk in another area, and all these areas were scattered across the organization, and they were not communicating. So the result of this fragmented approach was that firm would take huge risks in some areas of the business while over managing substantially smaller risks in other areas. So resources were misallocated as a result. And then you could have major vulnerabilities that go unaddressed while minor risks would receive excessive attention. So here's an example. Before the 2008 financial crisis, many banks had sophisticated systems for managing traditional credit risk. They had detailed policies, careful underwriting, and regular monitoring, but they had much less rigorous approaches to managing the risks in their trading books and structured products. The result was that they were carefully managing relatively small risks while taking enormous, poorly understood risks elsewhere. So this is the main problem that ERM tries to address. By looking at risk holistically, organization can see the full picture and allocate resources appropriately. They can also identify which risks truly matter most to their objectives and make sure that those receive adequate attention. So, why is ERM being adopted with increasing urgency these days? It's because of the changing nature that of the risks that organizations face. So, ERM is being adopted because of the increasing amount of environmental uncertainty that can affect the entire firm. So we're not just dealing with isolated department-specific risk anymore. We're actually dealing with systematic risks that cut across the entire organization. For example, pandemics, climate change, geopolitical disruptions, social upheaval, so technological transformation with AI, and so on. All of these are company-wide risks and not just limited to a specific department. So to understand the risk as it relates to an organization, we use the phrase enterprise risk management. Why? Because it provides a broad framework for risk analysis. So it's not just a process, it's a way of looking at risk that promotes risk awareness and strategic decision making throughout the organization. Critically, ERM considers the entire range of risks associated with running an organization. So this includes financial risk, like market volatility and credit exposure, for example, operational risks, like process failures and supply chain disruptions, strategic risk, and hazard risks like natural disasters and safety incidents. So the effects we're concerned about, as you can see, covers multiple dimensions. We worry about financial stability. For example, can we meet our obligations and fund our operations? We care about ongoing operations. Can we continue to deliver our products and services? And we also care about our long-term strategies, such as growth or expansion. Can we achieve our strategic objectives? So the beauty of ERM is that these considerations are actually built into the framework before any specific risk event occurs. So we're not scrambling to figure out how disruption affects our strategy after it happens. We already thought about it and considered all the interconnections, and we prepared accordingly. So an ERM mindset essentially helps us consider all these impacts when managing any individual risk. When we evaluate supply chain risk, for example, we're not just thinking about operations, we're also thinking about financial implications, strategic implications, and reputational implications too. So, as we said earlier, it's important to consider all the risks together, and ERM does that for us, okay, because it considers the entire range of risk associated with an organization, okay. But more importantly, it considers them together, okay. So that's the key piece here, is that it recognizes these interconnections between the different types of risk. For example, the effects of financial stability, the effects of operations. Can we continue to serve customers and execute our processes? And it includes also long-term strategies such as growth or expansion. Okay. And this is very important because risks are rarely independent, obviously. Okay, they interact with each other in complex ways. So for example, a natural disaster might trigger supply chain disruption, which in turn will create operational problems, which can lead to customer losses, which can affect revenues, which eventually strains our financial stability, which can itself limit our strategic options. So understanding this chain of events, the causation relationship, is essential for effective risk management. So an ERM mindset actually helps us consider these impacts when managing risks. For example, consider the COVID-19 pandemic. So organizations that had adopted ERM were obviously better prepared, not because they specifically predicted the pandemic, but because they had thought holistically about disruption scenarios and built organizational resilience. So they had considered how various risks might cascade through their operations and had developed capabilities to respond. In our next part, we will discuss some of the benefits of ERM.